The Vikings are 6-1. They lead the NFC North by 3.5 games, and I got to tell you, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
Ooh-wee! You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. The show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings, and thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. You can also find Locked On Vikings on Amazon, Fire, and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today, of course, we're breaking down the Vikings' 34-26 win over the Arizona Cardinals at home. A nice, fairly convincing win, at least by Vikings standards, even though it technically ends as a one-score game. We'll talk about it. Didn't feel like a one-score game. It felt like the Vikings outplayed the Cardinals, and that's my takeaway. This one feels real. And the other ones that, when you had to rely on a double doink to beat the Saints in London, when, the Bears had an 18-point deficit and they came back on you and you're going, gosh, like that feels so bad whether or not they win the game. Like that is such a concerning thing. The Lions outplayed the Vikings in that week 3 game, but the Vikings managed to come back and win it. Like all of these games you can sort of dismiss. You could even, if you really wanted to be like caustic about it, you could dismiss the Packers one by being like, well, the Packers, they're not even good this year. And they're it's week 1 Rodgers, and that's a problem. Like you could totally make up those excuses. And I guess you could make up the same excuses for this one, but I'm not going to do that. This win feels like they had a team that's not a terrible team. I don't think Arizona, I think they're underachieving, but I don't see them the way that I see the Bears or the way I'm going to see the Commanders coming up. I think the Commanders are a big problem. Even though they're 4-4, I don't believe in them at all. I believed in the Cardinals a little bit, and I think they made about as many plays in this one as I kind of expected them to. They played like a decent team, and the Vikings outplayed that and beat it fair and square. If anything, I thought the Vikings got hosed on a couple of calls. So that feels good, right? And now at 6-1, and the rest of the division is under 500. We get to start talking about the magic number. If you don't know what the magic number is, I'm citing Chris Thomason, who brought it up here, but it's a well-known concept about how many games the Vikings need to clinch the division. So they need to win 7 more games to win to clinch the division outright, and there's nothing anybody else can do about it. Or however many Vikings wins plus Packer losses, and I guess Bear losses too, because they have the same record. So Vikings win plus Packer/Bear losses, depending on which race you're looking at, needs to equal 7. So if we win 4 games and the Packers lose 3 games for the rest of the season, so we go 4-6 down the stretch, and the Packers go 7-3 down the stretch, Vikings win the division. And same deal for the Bears. So that magic number is 7, and we will continue to look at this throughout. Before Halloween, technically, at least as I'm recording this, it is not yet Halloween for about 40 more minutes. So before Halloween, we're talking magic number. Hard to ask for things to go any better than that. So the game itself started out with a gorgeous opening drive that was really propelled by the run game. We'll talk a little bit more about the run game, why I think it worked, but boy, it worked. Dalvin Cook, 111 yards and a touchdown on 20 carries. Alexander Mattison carries averaged 8 yards a pop. Even got some Kirk Cousins in there scrambling around and getting into the end zone even on a scramble. The run game really carried the game for the Vikings, and that's something Kevin O'Connell mentioned after the game that he really wanted to emphasize in getting those core runs going. And they kind of were you could tell that they saw something that they thought that they could run on the Cardinals, and they could. The run outproduced the pass in terms of like EPA and like the more advanced metrics and stuff. The run was more efficient. The running game was more efficient than the pass game, so calling runs actually like did better for them, which is rare. But then up 14-3, going into the 2-minute warning at the end of the half, they let the Cardinals drive back down and score on them. A lot of that was 2-minute stuff, but a lot of that was just screwing up a lot of run fits. The Cardinals ran it on them, and then scored. Like, it was just not a very good, it wasn't a situational drive, I don't think. Maybe the linebackers were playing a little deeper, but I noticed like mistakes that would have screwed up a play, at 1st and 10 in the second quarter too. So you're 14-10 at half, though. You're still leading. And then come the turnovers in the second half. And the Vikings really turned it on, especially in the fourth quarter. Still had that weird third quarter, like, disappearing act, where they actually gave up the lead at one point. They gave up, I believe, the Rondale Moore touchdown was in the third quarter as well. Rondale Moore breaks a couple of tackles. The Vikings trying to strip the ball, get the tearaway jersey, breakaway touchdown, just total busting in the second level after Rondale Moore catches like a 6-yard like hitch and he houses it, like super inexcusable stuff. And it looked like they were trying to strip the ball too much and they weren't actually wrapping up and tackling, kind of stuff that drives defensive coaches nuts. But the turnovers sort of salvage that. You have this Harrison Smith pick on a heave from Kyler Murray that was earned because there was a pressure that forced that throw to be off from Khyiris Tonga. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Khyiris Tonga gets a pressure. He's a new player, came off of a practice squad like 2 weeks ago, and he was active for the first time. So just like random rotational guy who was in because Jonathan Bullard was out. So you got a lot more Ross Blacklock in this one, and then they needed another guy active. So that's what he was doing there. Then you like get that turnover, you score instantly off it. You get stopped for a punt, and then they muff the punt, and then you score off of that. And then suddenly the Vikings are way out ahead, and from there, it was just the Cardinals trying to chase the game. There was one final drive where it looked like maybe 6-ish minutes left. The Cardinals were like driving. Tons of passes to DeAndre Hopkins, we'll get to it, but they were driving really fast down the field, looking like they were going to score that touchdown and bring the game, I believe, into a 2-point game. It would have been at that point. And then Zach Ertz and Kyler Murray have some kind of miscommunication. They're really mad on the sideline, but it turns into an interception right into Cam Bynum's lap. That one pretty much killed any chance because then the Vikings got to kill enough clock where it started to become like a hurry up, super warped end of game chasing it scenario. And then you have the down 8 moment or the up 8 moment which as Vikings fans, we get really skittish about because we're super used to watching the team blow leads out in the last couple of years. But that is always a more certain situation than it looks like. Because it looks like, man, they're one drive away. It's a 1-score game. This is it. This drive is it. But if they get that touchdown, which is a big if, then they have to get the 2-point conversion. Call that a 50-50 shot. So that touchdown just gets them a coin flips chance to get to overtime, which is a coin flips chance. So they have to get that touchdown just to get it back to like 25% chance to win the game. So, and they didn't. They did not get that touchdown. Couple of sacks at the end by an unbelievable defensive line performance, really capping that off. Seals the game for the Vikings. And I know it like felt like it was this close game. And oh my God, it's always down to the wire. It really wasn't. That was the Vikings beat the Cardinals straight up. They outplayed the Cardinals. They won the game. They go to 6-1. I want to talk more about some of the through lines of this game. The run game doing well. Zadarius Smith having a monster day. A couple of injury things. So we're going to go offense and then we're going to go defense. But before we do that, this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp Therapy Online. BetterHelp helps you get to a therapist that is right for you. Therapy is very important. I'm especially talking to you fellas. It is, in my opinion, it's like a workout for your emotional health. It's not a doctor you go to see when you're sick and then they help you get better and then it's over. It is maintenance, and maintenance of your mental and emotional health is just as important as maintenance of your physical health, and that's what therapy can be. A lot of people just go see like one therapist and it's not right for them, and then they throw their hands up and they never touch the idea again. But BetterHelp can help you get through that because you really should try a lot of people. Therapists are all very different, and you got to find the one that matches you. Otherwise, yeah, you're totally not going to like it. But stick with it and let BetterHelp help you. They can help you bounce between therapists and try different things, different consults, and get you matched up with somebody that is right for you. It's super important. So get unstuck with BetterHelp. Learn more and save 10% off of your first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you want something a little bit more substantive than a random game recap or what I can do on an audio medium, check me out on Patreon, patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. I would super appreciate it. Also, check out Locked On Sports Today. It's our flagship daily show covering all sports. All 4 major men's sports are in season right now, so Locked On Sports Today has lots to talk about. Go check them out. Let's talk first about the offense in this Arizona Cardinals win. First game over 30 points in 12 possessions, which is a fairly normal amount of possessions. They score 5 touchdowns. It's a pretty good output. You can be pretty happy with this on offense, even though it felt a little bit like they were kind of disappearing at times, and there were a lot of 3 and outs, and there was that one strip sack fumble. We'll get to all of it, but I think for me, the headline, the through line of the whole game that had the most impact on it was that run game, and particularly the zone run game. I'm not sure I saw 4, 5 maybe duo runs in this one. The rest of it was all zone, which is unusual for the Vikings. They usually like to split that up a little more. So I'm going to guess there was a game plan thing where they thought they could run zone on them, or the fronts that they expected to get from the Cardinals were more susceptible to zone, which is something I'll have to talk about in more depth later. But they saw something and thought zone runs would be better, and they were right because the zone runs were incredible. Dalvin Cook had a fantastic day, gets over 100 yards for the first time on the season. Now, he had a couple in the 90s, so it wasn't like he finally showed up for the first time or anything like that. But he gets over 100, that landmark we care so much about. And he was shifty. We did the postcast after the game. Sam Ekstrom and I did the postcast, as we do every game. You actually can find it in this feed, in this Locked On Vikings podcast feed, or on the Locked On Minnesota Sports YouTube channel, live after every game, after the press conferences. And he made a great point. Like, it looked like he wasn't protecting himself as much anymore in the way that he was going down, and it looked like he was because I think his shoulder maybe is getting a little better, he was attacking things a little more tenaciously, and the shiftiness was back. The make the first man miss every time was back. Not wholly, but it was a very vintage Dalvin Cook game. It looked like Dalvin Cook, but the blocking was also fantastic. Christian Darrisaw in particular, Ezra Cleveland was great. Even the guys that struggled in the past, Bradbury and Ingram, did really well. O'Neal, everybody did really well. Johnny Munt had a highlight pancake. Like, it was a great game all around for execution of those zone runs. And what happened on those zone runs to make them so successful, like schematically, is something I'll probably have to circle back to. But there is something. They cracked some code in the Arizona Cardinals defense, because they ran down their throats and they got tons of push, tons of physicality. They won up front. And that is how you get like a positive EPA passing game. Elsewhere on the offense, obviously the pass game wasn't as successful. So why was that? Well, for me, the thing that sticks out the most is Ed Ingram having a disaster class. Oh my goodness gracious, was it bad from Ed Ingram? They figured out that JJ Watt on Ed Ingram was going to work, which, like, well, yeah. And they did a really good job of getting him one-on-one. And I think that's going to be a theme of the week for me, is getting mismatched defensive line, offensive line one-on-ones, and how defenses go about doing that, because the Vikings did a good job on the other side of the ball of that with Zadarius Smith. But to keep it at a little brief at least, they used a lot of twists, and Ed Ingram just doesn't know how to, like, shift. He just was not able to, like, shift his angle, his body angle, and his body presence to pick up that twist. And so the angles were just all wrong for him, and it was really easy for somebody on the defensive line to get like a half-man relationship to him. And that means you've got all your weight on one shoulder, and you have essentially cut his strength in half. He can only push on you with one arm without holding. And Ingram failed a lot to that. And sometimes he just got walked back and bowled over. There were a couple of pretty bad Bradbury plays as well, but Ingram really stood out. But that's not like everything, right? A bad right guard, like a right guard can have 5 catastrophic plays, ruin 5 plays. Let's say they all turn into incompletions, or 2 of them turn into sacks or whatever. And that's like the worst right guard game you've ever seen. But that only affects 5 of the plays. What happened on all the other ones? And there was a lot of other stuff. And that's not to say that this was a terrible offensive performance. Again, like, it was, 34 points, but the passing game was not quite there. And there are some other minor things. I thought Kirk Cousins had a pretty good game. I liked what I saw from him. I liked the way he moved in the pocket. I liked the way he kept things alive and going. The scramble touchdown, I'm enamored. That's a quick way to my heart, is to do a scramble touchdown like that. That was awesome. But just to work the pocket too and find things open downfield, he just sailed a few. The accuracy was like spotty. And we've seen this a lot all year, which is unusual for him. And a lot of it is balls coming out high. I tried to investigate this after the Lions game where it happened like 6 or 7 times. I came up with a thesis. I don't think I was right. So I might look at it again and see if I can find something in this game, combine it with the Lions game, see if I can figure out why they're coming out high so often. When all the misses look the same, you got to think that the cause of that is the same. But with a live eye, you can't, like, I need to go frame by frame and Zapruder that thing to like have any guess as to what could be going on. Maybe ask some people too. But I do want to get to the bottom of that for you. That said, that was like 4 or 5 plays, and Cousins had, I think, more than made up for it with a couple of great balls to Justin Jefferson, a very aggressive third down pass to Justin Jefferson, who was blanketed one-on-one. It was just a jump ball contested catch, and that's Kirk Cousins just saying, I know Justin Jefferson's going to get that, so I'm just going to heave it up, and that's the mentality you want when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson, and Cousins talked about that after the game, about like, he's got a like, that ball is mine mentality, and I just need to trust it. And like, yes, absolutely. Love that. No notes. Converted a third down. Great stuff. If anything, do more of it. So solid game from Kirk, I would say. Definitely good. That outweighed the bad. On that, Justin Jefferson had a very quiet 98-yard game. I think he almost got 100 yards, and it feels like he disappeared. This is our expectation for Justin Jefferson now. I would guess, if once I go look at it, I'm going to guess that I see a safety on top of him a lot, and a lot of doubling and stuff, or the way that like defenses nowadays actually double. It'll look like that. And that got a lot of opportunities for Adam Thielen, who had he came down funny on a knee, had to go out for a little bit, came back in, but that's a situation to monitor. Christian Darrisaw actually was in and out of the medical tent. That's a situation to monitor, but he didn't miss any actual snaps, so I imagine that's pretty minor. But all that is stuff to monitor, and more injuries on the defensive side of the ball. Irv Smith also got an MRI, or is going to get, or probably has gotten by the time you listen to this, an MRI on his ankle. He rolled up his ankle on one of the final plays of the game. Kevin O'Connell informed us, so we got to look at that. But we'll see if he misses any more time or anything, or if it's just a little roll up. But all of that is just stuff to monitor. Can't really have a takeaway about it now. But all in all, there's a lot more to be happy with the offense than stuff to be angry at. But if you want stuff to be angry at, look at Ingram. You could hyper focus on a couple of those skied passes from Cousins that didn't come out right. Like, you could probably find stuff if you wanted to really make an argument, but I think you'd be doing so in bad faith. The defense had a very interesting game, and most of the intrigue is in positive stuff. They just did some really fascinating and cool stuff that's going to be fun to break down. So I want to make sure that I get to that. But before we do so, this episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Blue Nile can help you make your celebrations even more memorable. Blue Nile has helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring, or to commemorate whatever, right? It can just be an anniversary or just a nice gift for whoever that special someone is. And you can help handcraft their perfect one-of-a-kind engagement ring. You can shop stress-free because Blue Nile's 100% satisfaction guarantee ensures all orders, and they are shipped for free in discreet packaging, so you can't tell what is in there. They also have overnight shipping if you're like me and a procrastinator, and you're in a rush. They got your back. It's all good. Make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com and use code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. That's BLUENILE.com, code LOCKEDON to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com, code LOCKEDON. Moving on with a Victory Monday edition of the Locked On Vikings podcast. We've had so many of these. I would love for them to continue. The Vikings win, go to 6-1, 34-26. And here's the thing. The defense made a few mistakes and let them get, 26 points. In 12 drives, that ain't the worst. That's an average day. And I thought the defense looked more cohesive. And this is more of a process judgment than a results one. But I thought they looked more cohesive than they have all season. I think the defense, when I say the Vikings came out of the bye better than when they went in, I'm mostly talking about the defense. There were a lot less miscommunications and errors and coverage mistakes and stuff. Guys were in the right place. You just had matchups. It came down to matchups and who makes more plays, not who miscommunicates more, right? That's not what this game came down to. And that is so refreshing to see. That's what I had been begging for. And it goes a long way in my mind to treating the Vikings like a true the contending team you would expect when you see a 6-1 record. You see that and you think like what we're looking at with the Bills right now or the Eagles. You don't necessarily think of a team that's, barely beating the dregs of the league. This game was not like what we saw pre-bye from that defense. And let me explain some of the things that made it that way. And a huge one for me was Zadarius Smith and all of the sacks that he got. I think he ends up with 3.5 sacks on the day. He leads the league right now, or is tied for league with 8.5 sacks. Huge day for Zadarius Smith. And his performance speaks for itself. The way that he beat up on one-on-ones on backup offensive linemen, but 3 sacks is 3 sacks in the NFL. That's hard to get even against the bad O-lines. But what I found fascinating, and I'm going to spend a lot of time this week talking about, is how they got those one-on-ones and set them up. Danielle Hunter had a huge impact on this game because the Cardinals were very clearly prioritizing him and making sure that he was getting chipped and or doubled, and he was getting a lot of attention, right? He has been all year. If you want to know where Danielle Hunter is, watch the extra blocker. You will find Danielle Hunter. But I think the Vikings really punished them for that in a way that they hadn't really been able to. I think because they didn't have the right stunts rehearsed and stuff. They didn't have enough stuff installed with just one training camp with that D-line that I don't think they were capable, but they came out with a lot more creative stuff up front. And some of it was blitzes. A lot of it was just creative 4-man rushes with simulated pressures that generated one-on-ones. All I can say right now in the immediate aftermath of the game is that they did a good job of that. But how they actually did it, I'm going to be so interested in going into that. I'm gonna talk your ear off about how they got Zadarius Smith one-on-one with a backup center and backup left guard. That is something that the Cardinals should be hell-bent on not allowing to happen. But I think they were so hell-bent on the same thing, but with Danielle Hunter, that they let Zadarius Smith have the matchups that they wanted, and the Vikings feasted on it. That is the kind of misalignment that will win a team a game. And I think that had a huge, huge, huge impact. And of course, all the credit in the world to Zadarius Smith himself for playing on a bum knee and kicking the crap out of a whole bunch of guys. So that, Danielle Hunter's impact, by the way, is not just one of gravity, one of, drawing a lot of attention. He chased down a screen from the other side of the play. He pressured a screen and then pressured Kyler Murray on a screen and then also chased it down. Absolutely insane play. I don't know when the last time I've ever seen anything like that is, but also generating a lot of pressure on his own, being a really big force in the run game. A lot of the big plays that you saw from Ross Blacklock or even, Harrison Phillips and Dalvin Tomlinson, who goes out with a calf injury. He also needs an MRI. It looked like a non-contact injury to me. Calf is a better word than ankle, but that might be, I don't know if calf is Achilles, but I feel like if the worry was Achilles, we'd probably have heard about it by the time I'm recording this, but I don't want to speculate any more than that. So calf, MRI, we'll keep you posted. But he had made some plays before, and a lot of that was Danielle Hunter flushing a quarterback out, and then, DJ Wanham is also there. DJ Wanham is cooking, man. For a rotational rusher, I don't know if he's quite to the level of he is a full-on starter yet, but he is ascended to rotational rusher that you put up with because your guy needs rest to rotational rusher you're genuinely excited to put in every once in a while. And he is getting a lot more snaps. I would not be surprised to learn that he had the most snaps of his season in this game, and he's earned them. But a lot of that is because of Danielle Hunter screwing up angles, beating people, forcing Kyler Murray to flush out in a way that he didn't want to, getting him away from certain parts of the play. There is just so much to like on this defensive line and the way that they played. I could wax poetic about it for hours, but I do want to make sure that I still have time to talk about the back end, which, whoa, what an interesting day for some of those guys on the back. 2 picks, 1 for each safety. Patrick Peterson had a fascinating day. I'm sure he'll get lots of headlines and interviews. Dantzler had an interesting day on DeAndre Hopkins. Real quick before any of that, the linebackers, Jordan Hicks and Eric Kendricks, both made some plays. There was some playmaking there, and I didn't notice a whole bunch of mistake making, although there was the one drive, the 2-minute drive that was all run plays. I wouldn't be surprised to see some mistakes over there, but I didn't watch it. I didn't see it that close, so I won't try to speak out of turn there, but can't be too displeased with that, right? Um, so let's talk about Patrick Peterson because there's some emotion to this one. Leading up to the game, he was like, "Oh, it's just another game. No, it doesn't mean anything to me. No, no, no." That was such a lie. So Patrick Peterson, he had probably the best game he's had as a Viking for sure. Best game he's had since like 2018. Like an amazing game for Patrick Peterson. Pass breakups, being tested with go balls. Robbie Anderson, the point of putting him in Arizona is to take advantage of a slow cornerback. And at this age, Patrick Peterson is a slow cornerback. That he should be susceptible to that. But veteran wiles, and I think Robbie Anderson has some tells. So I think he was able to read stuff, give cushion when appropriate, close in when appropriate. He doesn't bite on double moves. Like, he just saw everything the Cardinals were doing. He was always in the right place. He could have had the 2 picks that he promised if he had a little bit better catching, but he certainly made the opportunities for himself. And that's what I care about more. Incomplete. You created an incomplete pass. I'm super happy with that. Bring in the interception or don't. I'm happy with that either way. But then after the game, oh boy, he's got some beef with Steve Keim. It is not our problem. Listen to Locked On Cardinals, and I highly recommend that you do. I love Alex, but listen to Locked On Cardinals if you want more on that beef. But suffice it to say, the divorce was a bit bitter with Arizona, and Patrick Peterson, I think, really loved having a true blue revenge game. Jordan Hicks also got a game ball as a revenge game, I guess, but he didn't seem to be as personal about it. Cameron Dantzler. I hate that I'm ending on 2 sour notes. Cameron Dantzler wasn't great, but how mad are you? That's going to be what we have to talk about with Dantzler. He got beat a whole bunch by DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins ate up his cushion, forced him to back up a whole bunch, and we know that that's a thing with Dantzler, that he backs off a whole bunch. He's still playing very cautiously and conservatively, and then, you give up a 15 catch in front of you, and it's like, what were you guarding? That was a first down. That happened a ton, but it's also DeAndre Hopkins. And I don't think he gave up a whole bunch to everybody else. It was just DeAndre Hopkins. So I think DeAndre Hopkins created some of that space by being as good as he is. Now you get ripped by DeAndre Hopkins. Everybody kind of gets ripped by DeAndre Hopkins. So what we kind of learn about Cameron Dantzler is, okay, at this particular juncture in his career, he is not the kind of corner that can lock down DeAndre freaking Hopkins. I don't think anybody thought he did, but that's the information that we gained. Okay, he is not that sort of superstar. Still a lot of room below that to be a good corner. So I don't take a lot of concern out of it, but it's kind of a matter of DeAndre Hopkins worked you. You kind of have to decide for yourself how mad you are about that. And then he did get one on DeAndre Hopkins, and I thought he had a whole bunch of really good plays outside of that when he was in flat zones or whatever. He just made a whole bunch of mistakes. The one that really bugged me was the turkey hole completion to, I believe that one was Hopkins again, where he just didn't get underneath it fast enough, and Harrison Smith didn't get over fast enough. Technically, that's supposed to be Harrison Smith's job when you're a half safety and it's a go ball down the sideline. The corner is not supposed to take it. The corner is supposed to play flat, and so it just looks like he's getting totally run by. The safety's supposed to come over the top of that a little faster, but if you throw the perfect turkey hole ball, it's notoriously hard for defenders to make that play, and it was a good ball from Kyler Murray, so I'm not too mad about any of that, but it did happen, and it was a bad day for Cameron Dantzler. Other things that were bad days that I'm not too mad about is the kicker, and we'll end on that. Greg Joseph missed an extra point, missed another 56-yarder. He has one of the worst field goal percentages in the league. 5 of his 13 field goal attempts have been from 50-plus yards, and I believe that comprises all of his misses. Yes, on check. That is all of his misses have been from 50-plus. So, how mad are you? And that was going into this game. Now it's 6 of 15 or whatever the number is. But, over a third of his field goal attempts have been over 50 yards. So you have to adjust your expectation for that. Greg Joseph has done a great job of containing his misses in the lowest EPA spots, the lowest leverage spots. Miss an extra point. That's only 1 point. Miss a 33-yard field goal. That's 3. He's not missing those. So he's making the field goals like that. If the misses are coming out in the same way, I have to talk about this a little bit more in depth another time if the problem persists. But if those come the same way, they were always to the right, it seemed like, okay, if they're all coming out the same way, it's the same thing as Kirk Cousins. If all the misses look the same, there's probably the same cause for them, right? There's probably one consistent and repeating cause. If they're all a bunch of misses, then you've got a bigger problem, right? Is he just not a gamer? He made so many in practice. There was so much praise in training camp. Did he get all his good balls out on the range, right? That's any golfer, it happens. But I think that is a problem that needs to be looked at. I am not to the point of firing the guy and bringing in another kicker. That kicker's going to have his own whole host of problems, right? If you're not employed at this point in the NFL, you are a kicker with blemishes. So you're just kind of trading a guy with one problem in for another problem, and I'd rather just try to fix problems. That's where I'm at with Greg Joseph right now, but I do think that needs to be looked at and fixed. This extra point miss was to the left, though. So maybe they tried something different mechanically and it was an overcorrection, and now you just got to dial things in. I don't know what kind of conversations are happening there. And if it becomes a bigger deal, becomes a bigger story, I'll probably take a moment to like actually try to hone in and see if I can't figure out, again, and talk to people who know more than me, and see if I can't figure out what the actual cause is, because I would love to get to the bottom of that. But for now, I am still pretty willing to be patient with Greg Joseph. We just kind of have it's a thing to keep an eye on. You know, it's like we're on a thunderstorm watch, not a warning with Greg Joseph. That's kind of where I'm at on that. Sucks to end on two sour notes because I think there's so much more good than bad in this game, and I want to make sure you come away with that. This one felt real. I've talked about how so many fake wins, and people have gotten mad at me for being like the team felt fake. This one felt real. So take that home, take that to the bank. The Vikings are 6-1. They are up to like 96% to make the playoffs, like 92% to win the North. It's happening. It's time to start thinking about how far we think this team can go once they get to that postseason. Pretty cool place to be on Halloween. Hope you all have a fun and safe Halloween. By the way, Halloween night, take the kids out trick or treating if that's your life. I will see you all tomorrow for Twitter Tuesday. Get your questions in at Luke Brown NFL or at Locked On Vikings, or fill out the Google form in the show notes, or send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. We'll talk about that then, and as always, Skol.